with introducing the concept and history as well as the common features of the Neo-Sufi movement. Now we would like to see its emergence and arrival to Sudan. That is because its arrival constitutes the advent of the second major synod to Sudan during the end of the French Sultanate. However, in this part of our episode, I would like to introduce and present the advent of the principles and the teaching of the Neo-Sufi movement, while in other episodes more discussions will be devoted to its contributions and influence in Sudanese setting. However, what distinguished the scholars was distinguish the pioneers of this Neo-Sufi movement that arrived to Sudan, by the way, have been described as scholars. They are scholars and they have their own concern with the acquisition and learning of science, as we are going to see in our discussion today. So these scholars see the idea of spiritual union with the Prophet as a replacement for the earlier ideal of annihilation in God. The researcher Dr. Aman Muhammad Al-Abeid in her thesis about the Sammaniya doctrine and politics has clarified this concept of annihilation in the Prophet in the writings of the founder of the Sammaniya Sufi order, Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim al-Samman. Al-Abeid states, like many of the 18th and 19th century orders, the Sammaniya doctrine is centered around the concept of Muhammadan reality. The Prophet is a mediator between Allah and human beings. The Prophet's love is the base of faith, the door of knowledge, and the secret of power. Out of the Prophet's light, the creatures have been created. Out of his generosity, failed, people and trees live. By the Prophet's love, the slave or servant obtains his needs and diminishes in his great light, reaching his ultimate goal. Thus, could be said, if the ultimate goal of the Sufi is reaching the Prophet. The Neo-Sufi movement that has arrived Sudan, by the way, at the end of the French Sultanate and during the Turkish rule, have been pointed to, researchers have been pointed to three of main or the major of them. That is the Sammaniya, the Tijaniya, and the Khatmiya. And as we know, Khatmiya, by the way, is a branch of the school of Sheikh Ahmed ibn Idris, the founder of the Idrisiya Sufi order. These three Turks, by the way, have been characterized with the notion of the reformist or the reformerism, a renewal into Sufi movement. So these reformed Sufi orders inspired by pilgrims returning from Mecca and Medina made headway in the Sudan. The Sammaniya, the Idrisiya school of thought represented in the Khatmiya, in addition to Mayzubiya, and furthermore the Tijaniya with its Moroccan origin offered a new concept to Sudanese Islam: acceptance of formal Islamic law and hostility toward the ignorant, but revered, or they have, by the way, they have their own stance towards the traditional way of Sufism. So they focus on acquiring the knowledge, learning the science, and at the same time abiding with Sharia, as we are going to see later. So, out of the observation and throughout their writings, I mean here the new Sufi movement pioneers and shuyukh who entered Sudan and disseminated and spread the teaching of the new movement. By the way, they are very concerned with the application of Sharia and acquiring of knowledge, and this is very observable when you come to listen or to read the writings. This pattern, here, Neo-Sufi movement began to change in the early 19th century when the Sudan came under the influence of what has been called the Neo-Sufi movement. So this pattern, here, the pattern of the existing Sufism and Sufi orders during French Sultanate began to change in the early of the 19th century, when the Sudan came under the influence of what has been called the Neo-Sufi movement, initiated, among others, by such figures as Muhammad ibn Abd al-Karim al-Samman, Sheikh Ahmed ibn Idris, represented in his student, Sheikh, my master, Sayyid Muhammad Usman al-Marqani, and in addition to Sheikh Ahmed al-Tijani. So these three figures, by the way, they were responsible behind the Neo-Sufi movement. They are responsible in terms of upholding its teaching and at the same time constituting the teachings of this movement. So the influence of these orders, here the Neo-Sufi movement in Sudan, is profoundly being noticed. That is during the end, by the end of French Sultanate, this organization started to influence Sudan profoundly, for they laid the emphasis on organizational forms and religious practices that transcended local communities. Between the 18th and 19th century, Sufi orders in Sudan went through substantial changes that enabled them to live through even more modern times. Today, Levitson argues, in the 18th century, brotherhoods transformed from all patterns of decentralized spread affiliation turuq into larger scale organizations, more coherent and centralized. In Sudan, in the early 19th century, the Sufi brotherhoods acquired a supranational appearance. Centralized brotherhoods began spreading, and such a transformation, allowing orders to broaden national support across tribal memberships by merging already active religious centers into a larger new tariqa network, mostly affected the Sammaniya, the Khatmiya, and Tijaniya. The founder of such turuqs in Sudan are either Sudanese who studied in Hijaz and got authenticity there, such as Ahmad al-Tayyib al-Bashir, the founder of the Sudanese Sammaniya, and al-Majzub of the Majzubiya order, or from Hijazi origin, such as Muhammad Usman al-Marqani, who descended from Hijazi family, in addition to Sheikh Ahmed al-Tijani, the Moroccan notable influential figure. All of these founders are considered to be scholars, as we have stated earlier. Coming to Sudan, this Sufi turuq or Neo-Sufi movement have been subjected to a process of localization. In other words, in order to find ground in Sudanese masses, they had to adapt to the prevailing figure of Sufi Sheikh Azwali, who was able to perform miracles. Such was the view of Dr. Amani Al-Abeid in her study, The Sammani Doctrine and Politics. So as I have stated, this new movement, a Neo-Sufi movement, represents the second phase of the doctrine in Sudan. The Samani, the first tariqa to enter the country, carries the teachings of its founder in 1766, followed by the Khatmiya in 1816, and then the Tijaniya in 1883. In addition to the Neo-Sufi movement sanads, by the way, other sanads, mainly of the Egyptian origin, such as Ahmadiyya Badawiya with its two branches, the Marazga and Sutuhiyya, adding to Al-Azmiya or Azmiya Sufi order, and later on the Burhaniya, are considered as an extension to the Neo-Sufi movement schools. This is so clear also in its doctrines and teachings. Another Sudanese Sufi order which you consider among the schools, I mean here the school of the Neo-Sufi movement, is that one that founded by Sharif Yusuf al-Hindi, that is the Hindiya Sufi order. However, if I would like just to give example to the influence and the effect of this new school, I mean here the new Sufi order in Sudanese setting, just I would like to point out to the influence and the impact of these orders in two types, that is the prose writing and poetry. So in poetry, it is there the clear influence, and for the first time the Sudanese come to encounter with new notions, that is reflecting the speech and the longing for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for the first time, as I have stated, the Muhammadan light, the Muhammadan past and Muhammadan reality, these notions, by the way, is a major pillar and a major tenet in this movement. So the Sudanese come across the influence of these terms and this concept with the arrival of this new movement. As the Sufi terms also came as a result of the influence of this new movement, for example, the longing and the passion to the beloved, and terms such as wine, intoxication, fana, baqa, all of these terms, by the way, became part of the dictionary of the Sufis in Sudan. This is, as I have stated, referring back to the influence of the coming of the new sanad, that is the new Sufi movement sanad. However, poems that have been composed by my master Sayyid Muhammad Usman al-Marqani, the founder, in addition to that one of Sheikh Ismail al-Wali, in addition to that of Sharif Yusuf al-Hindi, adding to the poems of al-Majzoub. All these, by the way, constitute a new movement, a new change in the composition of the Sudanese Sufi poetry. So Al-Majzoub is his masterpiece, عليك صلاة الله ثم سلامه ألا يا رسول الله إني مكرم. In this poem, by the way, how Al-Majzoub came with the language of a lover, with the language of a lover to the beloved, came to express his longing and his passion to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet birthday books also has been spread during this time, and here just I would like to point out to the book of Al-Asrar al-Rabbaniya, that is the famous Mawlid of Sayyid al-Khatim. And in prose writing, as the end of my speech here, I would like just to point out also to the famous book, that is the book of Al-Hikam al-Tayyibiyya, known as the divine praises on the human form, and it is interpretation, the unique jewel in the science of the unity and oneness. By the way, this book, which has been authored by Sheikh Ahmed is considered the first Sudanese writing known as Al-Hikam al-Tayyibiyya that bring in this episode I would like sharing you and make the contact of the Sudanese Sufism to the wider space of the Islamic mysticism outside the country. And so for the first time, Neo-Sufi philosophy has been on the human form presented to Sudanese throughout that authoring book of Sheikh, by the way, was presented. So at the end of my speech, I would like to restate the history of the influence and the impact of the Neo-Sufi movement. In addition to, by the way, contribution of the Sheikh himself caused Sudanese Sufism the great impact following in Sudanese society in all the field, in all domains of the life, in the all domains of the life. So a thorough discussion and debate will be presented in our coming episodes targeting the Neo-Sufi movement, influence and impact in Sudanese soil.